recent acquisitions. So this is going to look at OrderCloud, which is the headless e-commerce platform from Sitecore. So just a quick overview of the agenda here. So we're going to briefly walk through, introduction to what OrderCloud is. We're going to look at what Mach architecture is, and then jump into the platform architecture for OrderCloud, look at some key concepts, and then look at the various e-commerce models supported by the platform, and also look at stuff like catalog and product management, pricing, promotions, and then jump into extension points and configuration, and have a look at the dev experience. And then we'll wrap it up with a slide around what you can do next to get started and who you can reach out to get some help on the platform. So I'll try to keep it quick, so roughly, a couple of minutes per slide. This is kind of an overview of the platform for people who aren't familiar with it yet, so we'll keep it fairly high level. Cool. So just an introduction to Sitecore OrderCloud. So Sitecore acquired a company called 451 recently. 451 was built as a B2B first e-commerce company around 1999. So they've been around for a while. The platform is quite mature. OrderCloud is the platform that 451 built, which is a Mach certified, fully hosted, headless e-commerce solution for B2B, B2C, and B2X. Just looking at the platform scalability, and performance, we have a couple of stats from 2020. So roughly 20 million plus orders were processed annually, around $5 billion in transactions, 1.5 million users, and roughly 70K requests per second with the 99.99% uptime. So you can see from this, it's a fairly robust and scalable platform, highly performant and highly available. So after the recent acquisition, it has been rebranded to Sitecore OrderCloud. And again, we'll have a Q&A session in the end, but if you do have any questions, during the presentation, feel free to shoot. So we hear a lot of talk about Mach architecture these days. So OrderCloud is Mach certified. So what is Mach? Mach basically is an acronym for microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless. So microservices basically means that you have individual pieces of business functionality that are developed independently. So you can have different capabilities built for different technologies, for example, and the responsibility is fairly isolated. Next up is API first. So all the functionality is exposed through APIs, making it possible to tie different pieces of the application together to make a cohesive solution. And then the software is cloud native. So it means it's built on the cloud, it's high performance and highly scalable, and headless. So headless architecture focuses on the back end. So there's no front end for this, hence the term headless. So that's what basically Mach means. Next up, I'll jump into the platform architecture. So if you look at the slide over here, on the right, you'll see that it's split up into, these 4 different sections. So if you look at starting bottom up, there's a cloud infrastructure. It's multi-tenant. The platform is highly secure. There's 24/7 monitoring, storage and backups, automatic scaling, and updates. So being a SaaS platform, all of this is handled by OrderCloud and Sitecore themselves. Over here, you also have all the core e-commerce functionality. So your product catalog management, buyer-seller management, order management, promotions and pricing, and multi-location and multi-currency support. And all of this functionality is exposed through a RESTful API. And on top of that, as it's headless, you have multiple options for building the customer experience. So, for example, you could have a mobile optimized version, such as a mobile app. You could have different custom user buying interfaces based on the type of users, and then you can configure different workflows and approvals and roles and organizations. So being headless, it provides a lot of flexibility in how you want to consume those APIs depending on the end user. Sitecore also provides a bunch of developer tools, which is quite good. We'll look into that a bit later in the slides further down the track. But at a high level, there's a bunch of starter apps and SDKs. There's a lot of extension points and integration options available. So it's really developer friendly. So if I were to kind of summarize, at a high level, the key takeaways from this slide would be that, it's a developer friendly and language agnostic platform. So you can choose the front end technology that you want to implement with, depending on the flavor of the day. So, like for example, it's React these days. So feel free to develop in React. It's very dev friendly. Documentation is very good, and then the APIs are well documented and easily consumable. This allows you to build a composable commerce solution. So what you can do is take the best of breed solutions to meet the unique business needs of your client. So this is really a key selling point of headless commerce solutions. There's also robust authentication provided. So it's built on top of OAuth 2. Additionally, it supports OpenID Connect, which is built on OAuth 2. And lastly, the platform is very extensible, as I mentioned. So there's various integration points, such as webhooks, middleware proxies, and something called integration events. So next up, I'll jump into the key concepts, or you could say the key building blocks of the whole solution. At the core of the data model, there's these 5 entities. The first one is the seller. So they recently rebranded this marketplace. So if you look at the latest documentation, you'll see it being referenced as a marketplace, which is essentially the seller, which is at the center of the solution, which is a single seller organization. So if you look at, for example, a B2C scenario, this would be the actual business that's selling product. You also have buyers. Let me just get a pointer here. So you also have buyers. Buyers represent real-world entities to which sellers offer products. You also have users. So users can be set up as part of any of the key building blocks here. So users can be part of seller organization, a buyer group, or a supplier setup. And the really powerful thing is that this allows you to set up groups based on different roles, and then you can assign catalogs, pricing, permissions, etc., to each of those individual user groups based on their responsibilities. And then you also have product catalogs, obviously, to house your various variations of products. And then lastly, you have an optional building block over here, which is called the supplier. Supplier is an optional type of organization that's used in an indirect supply chain scenario. So what you can do over here is it can be configured to automatically forward purchase orders for fulfillment. So in a marketplace situation, which we'll look at shortly, you could have multiple suppliers that are actually fulfilling the product, and the business model basically here allows you to do that quite easily. Again, any questions? I think if you want to ask, probably shoot as we go. Next up, we'll look at the different e-commerce models that are supported by OrderCloud. So the easiest or the most straightforward one is B2C, direct to consumer. So in this case, what your setup looks like is you have a single seller in the middle over here, and then you have a unified catalog across different store inventories. And you could have multiple branded websites associated with different catalogs. And then in the backend, you can basically associate that with multiple distribution centers. And that allows you to have a single view of the commerce operations at a corporate level. So again, your common B2C scenario, you could have a single brand, multiple brands operating within the same organization and the same platform. Next up, we go into a B2B marketplace scenario. This is slightly more complicated. So in this case, you can see that we now have various suppliers on the left over here. So first off, this allows you to manage any number of buyers or buyer groups and user organizations. So in this case, let's say in a marketplace scenario where you have a single seller that has different buyer organizations. So these are your B2B organizations. So this could be, for example, one legal entity B, C. Each of those legal entities then have their own users. And you, as the B2B marketplace in the middle, can configure pricing, again, promotions, etc., for each of those individual buyer catalogs. And on the back end, you can have one or multiple suppliers that you integrate with to fulfill those particular orders. So this is quite powerful. Then you also have the retail or franchise model. So in this model, basically, your catalog is unified across different store inventories. So in this case, if you see the seller has a geographic catalog, and you have various customers, and the back end, you're managing inventory based on different store locations. So this allows you to develop kind of a franchise model. And then in the end, we have a combination of models. So using the same building blocks, you can build out a specific kind of strategy or model based on the business requirements. So in this case, if you look at this solution, the boxes in green represent B2C, and then you can have a hybrid kind of approach. And this is really powerful because, as we've seen in COVID, as during when COVID started, a lot of B2B organizations were pivoting to B2C. So in a platform such as this, you can easily extend it to cater to both B2B and B2C scenarios by plugging in different, for example, buyers or suppliers as required. Next up, I'll go into catalog and product management. So at a high level, OrderCloud supports any number of catalogs within an organization, and it can be shared among any number of buyers. And products can be assigned to any number of catalogs and can be organized to any depth of hierarchy. So you can see an example over here where you have a consumer catalog. So again, we're looking at kind of a hybrid organization here, which is usually the most complicated type, in which you have two types of catalog, a consumer catalog and a B2B catalog. And then within each of those catalogs, you have a separate hierarchy of categories, products, and variants. Again, you can have shared categories, shared products, but you can control pricing based on user groups. Apart from that, OrderCloud also provides robust search functionality. So there's standard keyword search, faceted navigation, filtering, sorting, and you can also have much more advanced search by integrating with Algolia. Next up, we have pricing and promotions. So the pricing and promotions engine is quite powerful again in OrderCloud. It allows you to do stuff such as variable pricing. So as I alluded to earlier, so you can have variable pricing based on the type of user, which allows you to have different pricing for business entities versus end consumers. You can also set up price schedules. So you can set up price schedules based on a combination of product and buyer user groups. And then you can associate custom tax, shipping, etc. To each of those. And you can also have price breaks, which allow you to set up tiered pricing. So for example, you have $10 if you buy one item, and then if you buy three, it's $8 each. So you can have that tiered pricing scenario. Apart from pricing, the promotions is based on a rules engine. So this is quite powerful. They've developed a custom expression language, which basically allows you to define promotions, quite flexibly. So this is an example over here at the bottom. So in this example, they're doing 10% off entire order when you spend more than $200 on specific categories. So you can see, I chose an example that's quite nested. So you can see that expression over here works with, for example, items, and you're basically evaluating specific categories and conditions. And then there's a value expression, and that's basically saying give 10% off the subtotal. Once you get the hang of the expression language, it becomes, again, quite powerful to structure the promotions as you need on the fly, right? And then you can also redeem promotions based on promotion codes. And again, for the promotion codes, you can control the target and the length and the redemption quantity, etc. So yeah, quite a powerful promotion engine. Next up, we'll dive into some of the extension points. So at the simplest extension point is your standard webhooks. So you can configure different webhooks in OrderCloud, which allows you to extend functionality with custom logic. Thing to note over here is webhooks can only be triggered to endpoints that write to the database. So post, put, patch, or delete. In this example, you can see a webhook that is injecting custom logic and a validation when a client submits an order. So as you can see, client submits an order within OrderCloud. There's a configured webhook which posts to this endpoint that you have on your side and does some validation. Could be doing some additional work as well, such as going to a third-party service, saving that data, etc. All customized, obviously, because it's in your domain, and then it's passed back to proceed with the rest of the order flow. Next up, we also have a concept of middleware proxies. So this is basically, I think a lot of us will be familiar with this. It's introducing, your own middleware through which requests to OrderCloud can be proxied. And this is quite useful when you need to orchestrate a number of calls in the middleware and provide a unified response to front end. So in this case, you can introduce your own middleware. You can aggregate different calls, orchestrate different actions with third-party systems. Um, and based on complex implementations, usually you'd have this kind of setup. And lastly, you have this thing called integration events, which is pretty unique to OrderCloud. So what this allows you to do is there are pre-configured integration events. They're similar to webhooks, but the key differentiator over here is that they're basically custom logic within a sequence of steps, and it's pre-configured. So basically, in this case, what you have on this diagram is a particular order worksheet and configuration data, and at different points of the checkout, where you have estimate shipping, calculations, etc. You have integration events that can basically hook to your external system, and which allows you to inject your custom logic. So as part of the checkout, let's say if you want to do custom price adjustments, you want to add shipping estimates, or you want to synchronize order data with third-party systems on order submission, this allows you to do that. Now, since this is tied to a sequence of events, if something fails, for example, at one point, it rolls back to the start. So it gives you that kind of chain of events. And so last I heard, I think integration events are still being built upon. So they're building quite a few integration points in the platform. Okay, so I'll just pause quickly over here. This kind of wraps up, platform overview integration. Again, any questions around that, do let me know. Otherwise, we'll jump into the dev experience.
Yeah. Rameez, I got a question. The integration events that you showed on the slide, does that allow you to do pre-calling to events, sending the message to OrderCloud? Like,
yes, for that, you would use webhooks. So you have pre-processing and post-processing webhooks. So you can I'd say probably, webhooks would be the way to go.
Okay, all right. So
with integration events, basically it's predefined events. So let's say something is predefined for estimating shipping.
Right.
That's where you can hook in. So it's basically predefined hooks, you could say, based on certain order flows.
So integration events is something you don't include customization in there. It's
You do include
Or
customization. So in this
yeah.
example, right, let's say you have the checkout flow. So
Mm-hmm.
within the checkout flow, there would be, X number of integration events. So let's say there's an integration event for the shipping endpoint. So this would allow you to hook into that and then provide your
Mm-hmm.
own customization. So let's say if you want to go out to a third party to provide a shipping estimate, you could hook into that. Again, you could use a webhook as well. So you could
Yeah.
configure a webhook because webhooks are more flexible and they can be configured with like more
Mm.
endpoints, you could say. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. It seems there's flexibility in that. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
no worries. Cool. So next up, I'll jump into the dev experience. So I've been having a play with the platform for quite a while now. It's really it's really built for developers. You can see from the documentation, it's very well detailed, well fleshed out, and APIs built on open APIs specs. So Swagger, it's a pure headless solution as I mentioned before. So you can use any front end stack. So front end developers would love this product. Um, Sitecore also provides a bunch of dev tools and accelerators. So first up is the OrderCloud portal itself. So this is a screenshot of the portal on the right. This obviously allows you to manage your OrderCloud instance. So setting up your seller, your buyer, users, etc. This is the central hub. It also provides a really handy API console. So this is what you see over here. It's kind of like you could think of it as Postman on steroids. So you can actually interact with the API within the portal over here. You can formulate calls. So there's like predefined, for example, parameters, etc. over here. So it's basically you could think of it as a layer on top of Postman. This is quite flexible when you're playing around. There is a Postman collection as well. So if you go to the website, you can export a Postman collection that comes with a bunch of different exercises. So that's really handy. There's also a bunch of JavaScript and .NET C# SDKs on GitHub. And then there's a couple of open source accelerators. One of them is called Catalyst. So this is an integration middleware library that's built in .NET Core. Again, this is available on GitHub. And there's something called Head Start. So Head Start is the open source implementation for the customer facing website, as well as an admin backend application, and both are written in Angular. There is a new Head Start being developed, which is Next.js based. I've already seen the repo. I think it's still in progress. Some of the functionality is out, but it's not fully featured yet. So in future, there's going to be a React Head Start as well. Really an important point to note over here is that OrderCloud is a pure headless solution, and there's no admin backend either. So the portal is basically used to configure, but from an end user perspective, there's no admin backend per se. So as part of your build, you would be building the website, which is the front end, as well as the backend for someone to actually go and for example, manage orders or set up promotions, etc. And the reason is because it's an unopinionated platform. So the idea of this is we're supplying you all the plumbing. Now you can use that to build a platform, around it as you need. So in certain complex scenarios where you have, B2B or marketplace situations, your backend admin application would look totally, different from one organization to the other. And in some cases, you might not even need it. So you might be hooking in directly with ERP systems, and you're just using APIs to push data in. So that's why it's totally unopinionated, and allows you to build the entire ecosystem around it. And I think that's almost there. So I guess next steps, visit ordercloud.io. As I said, there's a lot of documentation there, and it's very easy to get started. You can create a free sandbox. So this gives you a fully featured sandbox. If you go right now, just create an account with the portal. You can start and going developing a full featured platform from day one. You get a sandbox. It is performance throttled obviously, but there's no functionality differences between like a prod instance and a sandbox instance. So that's pretty cool. And then again, visit the developer tools page to look at the developer tooling, download the Postman collection. There's really a good set of exercises that come along with it. And then, yeah, visit GitHub for the Head Start application so you can start. So again, it's Angular at the moment. There is a Next.js React based one that's in development. And lastly, yeah, reach out to me on Sitecore Slack, LinkedIn, Twitter, what have you. And if you have any questions, you want to explore anything, just hit me up. And then obviously, if you, most of you probably are on the Sitecore Slack already. If you aren't, there's an OrderCloud channel on that, so you can post your questions to that as well. And with that, I'll open it up for Q&A.
Well, that's great. It looks like a pretty powerful and flexible platform. I'm just wondering, for those organisations, those customer organisations that don't want a completely blank slate, but
Yep.
they do want a back end interface for their sort of their merchandisers to pump in some data for the products and so on.
Yep.
How feature complete really is that Head Start application? Do you
So Head
think?
Start is production ready, right? So it's been around for a while, which is the Angular based one. So that comes with the backend and the front end. So if you're happy with Angular, again, depending on the client's tech landscape and the stack they're on, if they already have Angular in the ecosystem, you can kickstart with that pretty much straight away. So it is fully featured.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, I think the tricky thing over here is, in a B2C scenario, it's fairly straightforward, and you can have kind of a standardized or generic backend. But when you come to B2B scenarios or franchise models or marketplace models, then your backend starts to get more complicated because the requirements are totally different from one business to another. So then probably you'll get into the
Mm.
customizing further. Yeah.
What what about the scenario of a house of brands where they have a series of separate shop fronts, but they are actually fairly similar to each other, maybe just with some slight variations along the way.
So again, I think you should be able to. Then it would be like because if you're building the backend, right, and if you need, for example, theming, then again that would depend on your architecture as you would for any other app, right? So if you just need different theming for different stores, whether you actually need different functionality,
Mm.
you would build it based on that. Yeah.
Well, perhaps different price books for the same set of products that are pumped out through different front ends.
Yep, you could. So if you look at, maybe I'll jump to that slide where we have this one might be a good um, starting point, or even this one. So you can basically, if you look at these buyer catalogs, right, as well as the suppliers. So you can have different user groups within each of these organizations, and then you also have permissions tied to catalogs as well, right? So using that combination, let's say if you want to have different pricing um, for, if you're talking about a B2B scenario, so if you have different um, buyer profiles, so you can customize the pricing based on each of them. So when you're setting up your price books, you can associate various groups to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does the system already come with guide conditions, for example, to prevent cascading deletes, where if a supplier deletes, for example, deletes a particular line item from um, their catalog, that it doesn't just cascade all the way through to everybody who already has a few in their sort of buyer catalogs, or
Uh,
would the developers have to apply that kind of logic?
yeah, that's a good question. I would guess that the system would cater for it because I think that's quite a core functional, like a core feature of the actual, data model itself. So if there is a certain hierarchy, let's say of catalogs, right, I would imagine that's taken care of, but I'm not 100% on that one.
Mm. I
Yeah,
know some other e-commerce platforms that don't actually
do that. Yeah,
guard against such sort of scenarios. Yeah.
yeah. Just my guess. I think I haven't encountered, like, actually delved into that scenario specifically.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else from the floor with some questions?
Tough crowd, man.
Okay. Tough crowd.
Tough
Yes.
crowd.
Tough crowd, yeah.
Okay.
Nah,
We
that
do
was
have
really
16
cool.
participants, but
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Adrian, I see you've unmuted. Did you have something to say?
Now I was wondering whether are there any special sort of querying language for the API to retrieve the products? Rameez? I'm not sure.
it's standard REST APIs.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no
It,
specific query language now.
yeah, maybe it's too low level stuff, but yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Like the APIs themselves are built on the Open API spec, right? So, and they're all REST with the, and all the responses are JSON based, so it's JSON everywhere.
So, like the only domain-specific language is that expression language when you're pumping in
Correct, yeah.
business rules. Okay.
Correct, yeah. That's only for the rules-based engine, where the expression language comes into place.
Okay. So this is all designed to be composable, and you can mix and match your front ends, mix and match your back ends. How does it play if you're sort of semi-integrating this with an existing Sitecore commerce solution?
Ooh, that is a good question.
Or
That
does
would be
it?
quite, that would be quite challenging. Just I think conceptually, yeah, I wouldn't see a reason to run them side by side unless you had like a B2C implementation that's already on XC, and then you're going to B2B, because XC doesn't really have B2B. There is an accelerator, but that's not really, third party provides it, not really good. I shouldn't say not really good, but it's not that, I guess, feature rich. So
Or say there was a customer who had marketing sites just on XP, but then we're looking at bringing in a commerce capability. Would they be able to sort of blend ordinary Sitecore just for their marketing pages with OrderCloud for commerce?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. I think, I mean, it's again headless, right? So you can pick and choose which parts you want to use. So let's say if you're transitioning, maybe you just want to expose your products and don't want to have a full checkout. So you can load your products in and then surface them on different pages for marketing purposes, and then phase out any other platform you might have for the actual checkout. So that you can do that, and also you can do, obviously, again, it's in the composable world, right? There's all these different bits and pieces, so you'll need to integrate with something, let's say, like Content Hub for images. You might want to do that, and then you might want to integrate again with BoxEver to push orders, so you can use the decisioning engine in BoxEver to, I don't know, run loyalty campaigns, etc. Yeah. And then again, the approach I would use for that is, using those 3 extension points. So something like webhooks, you could use potentially, let's say if you want to do personalization, customers submit an order, you submit that to a webhook, and that basically pushes that into BoxEver, for example, and then you can personalize any other website, based on that information. Yeah.
Is Sitecore also building up a marketplace of sort of pre-built connectors for this platform, the way they do with XP? Do you know?
Not that I know of at this point. That would be good, though.
Hey Rameez, I have a question, especially regarding the search capability that you mentioned, that it provides out-of-the-box integration with Algolia, I guess, right?
Algolia is a custom integration. So
okay.
Yeah. So there's like basic search. Let me get to that slide. So there's a basic search for keyword, faceted, filtering, and sorting, etc.
Yeah.
And
okay. So does it provide integration with other search engines like Covio or even so?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of that's out of the box.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think probably, as this the Sitecore ecosystem evolves with this new platform, then they're slowly going to start to come up with those connectors,
Hmm.
especially if you look at Covio, right? So they have an XC integration already. So I guess they might come up with something soon.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And the other question I had is like, especially with XCV existing currently, so how these two is going to play together? The autocloud, like it's similar to what, I don't know the name, but the
With
previous question, right?
with experience commerce, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a couple of different things, right? One is like if you look at the whole how the whole platform is evolving,
Hmm.
not just the commerce bit. So if you look at, for example, Content Hub, Musa, and Boxever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is going like I think there's a place for each of the different components depending on the use case, right? So if you want a composable DXP, there's more development effort to build that because you're
Hmm.
building everything from scratch. Whereas
True.
with something like XC, you have SXA storefront, which comes with pre-built components.
Hmm.
So you get the advantage depending on the tech maturity of the organization you're working with. Kind of that direction changes because it's more expensive to build with fully composable system, whereas and the
Yeah.
trade-off is that and that's not a SaaS platform. Obviously, you need to manage it, manage the
Oh.
infrastructure, manage the monitoring with XC, whereas this is fully SaaS, right? So you don't need to worry
Yeah.
about anything. You spin it up and you're good to go.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true.
So I think long term, probably it's not clear at this point, right? But I think probably in the
Hmm.
short term, there's a place, for both in parallel.
Yeah. Probably yes. The roadmap with Sitecore has to be defined, especially with both e-commerce platforms
Exactly.
existing,
Yeah.
coexisting.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, probably like I reckon it's moving towards this direction overall in the platform towards a headless and composable architecture.
Makes sense. Thanks, Ramesh. It was good.
No worries. Thank you.
Yes,
Cool.
that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Rameez.
No worries. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everyone. So I'll
So
stop sharing.
we will. There we go. Cast of characters. We will take a short break. 5 minutes, say. So about 10 to 7, we'll come back for the next session. And you can stay online if you want to have a